Right, good morning. My name is John Watt. I'm presently the chairperson of the Parole Board for Scotland. I've been doing this since 2013. I intend to give up the chair role at the end of 2025, and the Judicial Appointments Board for Scotland will soon be recruiting for a replacement, and they have asked me to do this video just to give an idea of the governance, or rather non-judicial functions of the chair of the board. There is no statutory provision for governance of the work of the board, so it's likely that each chair will approach the task in a different way. To an extent, the job is what you make of it. In the course of 2013, developed a memorandum of understanding with Scottish Government, and in that we worked out a governance system. Parole Board Management Group was the name of that governance body, and that is a group of members and officials who look after the governance of the work of the board. Technically speaking, I think the only obligation for governance was on the chair by virtue of their instrument of appointment. It took from 2013 to 2017 to agree that first memorandum of understanding, and that's now been overtaken by a memorandum of agreement. This establishes an overarching structure for parole in Scotland called Parole Scotland. Parole Scotland will consist of two parts: the Parole Board for Scotland, statutory judicial body, and the Parole Scotland Executive, which is the civil service staffed administrative support body for the Parole Board. That memorandum sets out how each function will work and how they will interact with each other. The first thing to say is, I think, that the board has no hierarchy. It has no management structure. At best, the chair is a primus inter pares, or depending on the gender of the appointee, a prima inter pares, I suppose. The board is a judicial body. Its judicial work can't be governed by anyone other than the court, but its administration and interactions with Parole Scotland Executive and other bodies can be. The board has no budget as such. Bills are paid from the Justice Division of Scottish Government's budget. The Chief Executive of Parole Scotland Executive does have some delegated financial authority, but the accountable officer for budget purposes is the Director of Justice at Scottish Government. Now, individual members of the board may have some functions which could be seen as non-judicial, for example, interviewing of registered victims in lifer cases, but that can equally be seen as part of the board's inquisitorial function. So let's start by looking a bit more closely at the board and its origins, and then we'll move on to the chair. The Parole Board is a body corporate initially constituted by virtue of Section 59(1) of the Criminal Justice Act 1967. Originally, its function was advisory. Politicians would make the final decisions on release on parole. In its current form, it is constituted by Section 20 of and Schedule 2.2, the Prisoners and Criminal Proceedings Scotland Act 1993, the 1993 Act for short, with powers and duties allocated to it by statutes including the 1993 Act, the Human Rights Act 1998, the Convention Rights Compliance Scotland Act 2001, the Management of Offenders, etc. Scotland Act 2005, and the Management of Offenders Scotland Act 2019. The board is no longer advisory. It makes enforceable judicial decisions. The board now has 40 members, 16 legal and 24 general, and they sit as panels of 3 or sometimes 2. Legislation has provided for the membership of the board, including the chair, the appointment and reappointment of board members, and Schedule 2 of the 93 Act provides for a chair and not less than 4 other members. So the chair is also a member of the board. Appointments are 5-year rolling appointments with automatic reappointment, subject to a recommendation not to do so by the chair. And there are provisions in the 93 Act which relate to misconduct and the likes. The performance of judicial duties, Part 1 of the 93 Act covers that. It also covers removal of board members from office, remuneration, allowances and expenses of board members, and those are currently under review. It also covers reports made to Scottish ministers, which they are to lay before the Scottish Parliament. The board is constituted as a tribunal non-departmental public body. In exercising its statutory functions in relation to the release of prisoners, the board acts entirely independently from government and Scottish ministers. It does not determine or resolve legal disputes between parties of any kind. It is an inquisitorial court, and thus it's quite unlike a conventional adversarial court or tribunal. In Scotland, it is unique. When performing statutory functions, the board acts as an independent judicial body, and it's a court for the purposes of Articles 5, 4 and 6.1 of the European Convention on Human Rights. In exercising its functions, the board must be and be seen to be subjectively and objectively independent and free of both executive interference or influence and the appearance of such. The chair has to defend and preserve that independence against any challenge. That is a substantial part of the chair's obligation. So, that said, let's turn to the chair. The chairperson of the board is appointed by the Scottish ministers on the recommendation of the Judicial Appointments Board for Scotland. The chairperson has a key leadership role and provides active and effective support and guidance to board members to ensure, so far as within their power, that they perform the duties allocated to them in terms of statute, and the board delivers its functions effectively and efficiently. More specifically, the chairperson of the board will ensure the board is functioning efficiently, effectively, legally, operationally and financially. Now, that said, the board exists at the end of a chain of other bodies who gather and prepare information. So to a great extent, the board can only be as good as the individual parts of the chain. The chair is responsible for the production of the annual report. In practice, the Parole Scotland Chief Executive drafts that, and the chair approves the report before it goes to Scottish ministers to lay before Parliament. The chair leads the board, ensuring that all board members have suitable induction to understand their role and their responsibilities. The chair must also ensure the board undertakes regular self-assessment of its performance, and that is carried out through Parole Scotland Management Board, which receives detailed and targeted financial workload and performance data, which is analysed and corrective action taken if that's necessary. The chair must also maintain and keep under review a system for peer reviewing the performance of board members and making recommendations to Scottish ministers on the continuation of members' appointments where that's appropriate. 2 peer reviews per member take place in the 5-year appointment period, one after it starts to ensure that the member is fit to stay in office, and one just before the end of the period so that it can form reappointment. The chair must also ensure that there's a statement of principle of ethics and behaviours in place, and that board members understand their responsibilities. Working with the Scottish Government sponsor team, the board ensures that recruitment processes for new board members where required are commenced properly. The chair also undertakes the authorisation of legal proceedings and the instruction of solicitors and counsel in relation to legal proceedings. The chairperson, in their discretion, can assign up to 2 members to act as vice chairs on such conditions as may be agreed. They do not receive enhanced payment for that. They will simply receive normal member fee rates for work that they do. The board has a scheme of delegation which sets out how the responsibilities of the chairperson can be delegated, and that can be found on the website and is worth a look. It's brief. The chairman shall meet with the Cabinet Secretary for Justice at least annually to discuss the effective financial management and operational efficiency of Parole Scotland and discuss the continuing effectiveness of the sponsorship arrangements. In terms of the chair's instrument of appointment, the chair must act within and accordance with the policy framework assigned to the Parole Board by the Scottish ministers in relation to governance and management matters. Again, in terms of the instrument of appointment, the chair is individually accountable to the Scottish ministers for their actions and decisions other than decisions in respect of a case considered by the Parole Board in the exercise of its independent decision-making functions. The chairperson's performance is reviewed annually by the Director of Justice in the Scottish Government against the functions of their appointment other than that of independent decision-making, in respective cases, and also to the extent to which they contribute to ensuring that the board as a whole delivers its functions effectively and efficiently. Becoming involved in or being consulted on draft legislation going before the Scottish Parliament is an area where I don't think there's much doubt that the board can become involved, and Parole Board Management Group and the chair can be involved as such. The question is the extent to which it can become involved. Scottish Government consultations, these are public consultations, and there's no reason why the board should not become involved. Let's look at what was the Parole Board Management Group and soon will be the Parole Scotland Management Board. This is the board charged with responsibility for governance of the work of the board and the Parole Scotland Executive. It consists of the chairperson of the board, who will chair the management board, the chief executive or a nominee, the vice chairs, and up to 2 board members, it's Parole Board members who are voted on by all Parole Board members and will serve for no more than 2 consecutive terms of 2 years. There's also provision for appointment of independent non-executive members, and they are considered in the wider context of Section 41 of the Management Offenders Scotland Act 2019, which I'll cover in a moment. Section 41 of the 2019 Act is as near as we get to statutory provision for governance. It legislates for Scottish ministers to authorise the chair of the board to make governance and management provisions. The power is exercised by statutory instrument, and while the section has been commenced, no progress has yet been made on the statutory instrument. So as chair, I do not yet know the extent to which I will be able to make rules or provisions. Decisions of the management board will be by a majority. The chair will have a casting vote where there's a tie. There are arrangements for quorum, and the board meets quarterly, although there's provision for meeting in between times on matters of urgency. In the absence of statutory provisions specifically relating to governance, it is the management board which will henceforth be the group charged with responsibility for the effective and efficient day-to-day operational management of Parole Scotland, although some functions will be discharged by the chair or chief executive. The corporate governance of Parole Scotland, the setting of policy and strategy for the operations of Parole Scotland, in relation to non-judicial matters, of course, the preparation of corporate and business plans, regular scrutiny of current and projected performance against aims and objectives, and taking decisions on remedial action where that's required. The management board will also ensure that effective internal governance of Parole Scotland is established and maintained, including ensuring that decision-taking is open and transparent, and ensure that key risks are identified. Decision-making must relate to non-judicial decision-making, because the rules which dictate how the panels of the board operate require confidentiality. So non-judicial decision-making can be opened. The kind of risks that we're looking at are, for example, backlogs of reports building with SPS, which will create problems at the board, and also in relation to delays in prisoners having their cases reviewed timely, or reports in the dossiers which lack key information, and the management board will have to find ways to resolve that. Management board also approves the board's annual report and ensures that it goes timely to Scottish ministers. It is to promote the efficient, economic and effective use of resources and regularly scrutinise financial performance and compliance with financial guidance issued by the Scottish Government. The board's responsible for developing reference and guidance manuals and the management and exchange of information on relevant case law and changes in legislation and practice. The board has to make provision to support the well-being, learning and development of Parole Scotland executive staff and provide support and challenge to the chief executive on staffing matters. There is a training group which is attached or answerable to the management board, and it coordinates 4 training days per year, the board being responsible for the training and development of members. The board has to ensure measures in place to ensure compliance with victim legislation, and all members have been trained in victim support matters. And finally, the Management Board has to consult with board members and Parole Scotland executive staff on decisions which impact in a significant way upon the performance of their functions. So the Parole Scotland Management Board has become the body charged with corporate governance matters, but there may still be conflicts between the Chair's instrument of appointment and the Memorandum of Agreement setting up the Parole Scotland Management Board. And the easiest way to reconcile these is, as I said above, I think, for the Chair to accept that their governance functions are now exercised through Parole Scotland Management Board. What Parole Scotland Management Board cannot do is interfere in judicial decision making, which must remain subjectively and objectively independent. There's been a bit of a gallop through all of that, and I'm bound to have missed something out. I would also suggest that applicants have a good look at the board's website, which has a lot of useful material on it, especially the guidance material. In closing, can I say that it's been a real privilege to chair the Parole Board for Scotland and to work with members and staff whose commitment has been and is exemplary. The work of the Chair is fulfilling, challenging and rewarding. It has also at times been deeply frustrating, but finding workable solutions to difficult problems can also be very satisfying indeed. Thank you. Thank you for listening, and I hope that you got something from this presentation. If you're going to apply for the post, good luck.